Hey everyone, I'm Erin Christovale. I'm the Associate Curator at the Hammer Museum. Thank you for joining us this evening for a screening of Last Light, which is a short film made by artist Carmen Argote. The film is roughly 12 minutes, so we'll watch the film and then we'll go into a conversation with Carmen about her work, this film, and her larger practice. Last Light is made in conjunction with Hand Dog Glove, which is an exhibition of Argote's recent work across three spaces, Clock Shop, Commonwealth and Council, and Stairwell LA. Last Light was made prior to and during the pandemic and stands as a meditation on various themes, chiefly among them the heightened attention towards one's memory, mobility, and mortality. Please join me now for the screening of Last Light and feel free to stay afterward for a conversation between Carmen and I. Thank you.
Is this fear so paralyzing? You've decided that my body's contaminated. I feel like I'm not made to last. I'm not the one who's gonna make it. I don't think things will be the same.
Thank you, Carmen, for joining us.
Thank you, Erin, for having me here, and I'm excited to be here.
So we just saw your film Last Light, which is actually the first film you've ever done, which I have to say, when you sent me the rough draft of it, I was like totally blown away. It's so well done, from the editing to the soundscape to the narrative. And I feel like it's this whole new experience of your larger practice. And I think was a fitting medium for you to use in light of the pandemic and the practice that you've been enduring, I think, for years now, which is your walking practice, which seems to have become such an integral part of your art practice. So can you talk about that? Can you talk about how the simple act of walking really shaped this film and continues to shape your art practice?
I think going into the film, first I do want to say that it was a team effort, working with Julia at Clock Shop, and then sort of having this support both in resources and in talent, with Aldo being the editor, Johnny Wilson bringing the sound, Gina, and of course Julia, and us in dialogue has really shaped what this film has become. But the walking process, I had been working with Clock Shop for a while, developing, originally it was a sculpture, like a series of sculptures. And the walking process, within that process of thinking about land and the body, had been going on for about a year, going to the bow tie and then sort of really kind of just processing through the body. But the walking process uh, for me it's taken different forms at different points in my life, and in terms of my practice. So the way that it had been, or the way that it started, is a way of like sort of connecting with the spaces around me. Usually, for example, when I was in Bogota, or when I'm in like a new place, walking allows me to situate myself, allows me to search, allows me to connect. And it also, there's something about the action of being in movement that allows me to think. It's a thinking process. In walking, I'm able to sort of find fragments that my eye sort of gravitates towards, and think with my whole body. And I really do feel like at times it's felt like I'm moving through dimensions. It's felt like this act of moving and thinking is an act of processing. And then being able to use the phone as a way of like almost like capturing these fragments, or note taking. The phone in terms of audio files, the phone in terms of still images, and in terms of video. And so that process had been going on for a while, and some of the stills in the film extend, like before this year. They're like brought in too. So it's just there's the body, there's the like I think about my body as the studio, but also in this case the phone became this really interesting medium to almost like reflect back. So then there's things that felt very familiar in terms of my process of walking, and then there's things that felt new with the filmmaking process. Really, I think the filmmaking process focused it on, turned that process onto me, and it turned it into like a more psychological space, processing through the body, but then also being able to really address the psychological space that filmmaking could reflect back. Mm-hmm. So there's like a lot of back and forth movement. Where usually if I'm working on, let's say like a sculpture, it's me really going into something and noticing those details, and then having that distance to pull those details out. In this case, it was me experiencing, the sound of the like walking, the sound of the ambulances and helicopters, feeling the energy of everything that was going on around me, coming home, continuing that same process at home, but then listening to myself, like listening to these things, like that, just like turning the phone on to me, and then being able to listen to the notes and the audio files, and somehow the technology allowed for that distance.
Yeah. And I feel like, that is kind of how we're all perhaps processing this moment, for the most part through our phones, whether it's receiving information, whether it's being in communication with other people, and in your case, whether it's the phone is sort of a documentation site, of something that you're creating. And I wanted to talk about, I think, the way that these various formats have sort of found themselves together through this film. I noticed that, there's a lot of still photography coming through, and a lot of, still photography that's captured on your walks, either through your phone or perhaps through another camera. So can you talk about how these various formats come together? I think something that's really beautiful in this film is, you know, the texture and the fabric and the feel of the film, I feel like really lends itself to the aesthetics of the city, you know, which are very gritty, dirty, scrappy. So can you talk about that sort of texture scape that you were building through these formats?
Yeah, I think it has a lot to do with time and the time frame of the film as well. So I predominantly would take notes by taking still photographs. And that has been a longer process. So in my walks, even like palm fronds on the sidewalk or marks on the floor, I found myself really focusing my gaze onto the concrete, not to the floor a lot. And so really taking those textures and moments that I, just first taking these moments. And then once I had this idea of the film, or like trying to search for what the film was going to be, and then I was also simultaneously feeling the inability to touch the city. Surfaces started like really kind of becoming almost like a point of focus. Moving image started really becoming a point of focus. When I walk, I do walk in these circuits. So I walk the same route. And a lot of that depends on my starting point. So when I was living in Koreatown, for example, I had a specific circuit that propelled me to go to downtown and back. And that kind of had specific, I don't know, like moments that I would gravitate towards. And then when I moved over here to the east side, then I took on a different circuit, and then that really kind of shaped, the points of focus in the film.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think it's such a rare point of view of the city, you know, being on the ground, and, you know, this notion that LA is a car city, and, you know, we're always sort of encapsulated in these automobiles. But I feel like you really offer a rare glimpse of, you know, what being on the ground feels like and looks like. And I think through that, you really sort of highlight and prioritize, you know, communities and populations that are not necessarily valued, and who have been suffering the most, I think, through this pandemic. You know, I think of, you know, obviously LA's ongoing homelessness crisis. And I think also of all of the people who are working these, you know, quote unquote, essential jobs, who are taking the bus, who are even street vendors, you know, and the fact that these are predominantly Black and brown folks. And, you know, I was reading some stats about the virus recently, and over 40% of people affected by the virus in Los Angeles County are Latino. So I think through your sort of wayfinding of the city, we get a more intimate portrait of, you know, how various people are living with this pandemic. And yeah, I think there's a lot of discussion around class and, you know, who has access to surviving, essentially.
No, I mean, like the structures really like reveal themselves when you're at the pedestrian level. Like for me, walking in public space is really important. It's something that, you know, moving my body through the land, being able to see what's actually going on, not having that distance. You know, first walking is slow, like really making a conscious decision to give myself that time to see, to experience, to notice, to be in presence, to connect to the city in a very, what I feel like is in what's actually going on, not like in like this perceived thing of what's going on, but and bodies are very present and have been for for a long time now. You know, I've often said I feel like I was walking over bodies and then noticing that desensitization in myself, noticing the desensitization of that as a city, feeling that, like really kind of digesting that, but then confronting that in myself. So it's being on, you know, and I do call it like at the pedestrian level, like in that way, like really allows, like I feel like it's it shows me the truth of where I am and where we are. Right. And that, when in thinking about the film, that it was like, the film has to come from that place. Mm-hmm. So it extends through time as well, and touch and the body really come into that. You connect with people in a different way. You are able to question things in a different way, because you're hearing these phrases, or you're hearing everything at like this like distancing, or this distance. And I'm like, no, like this is the present. It's visceral. Right. And that to me has an impact psychologically. It has an impact emotionally. It has an impact that's felt in sort of working through that in myself, mm-hmm. to be able to grow more whole, and then also working that to notice what's going on, and to, you know, to feel, really allowing myself to feel and connect with the city, and then that really allows me to see more clearly, and then to be able to you know, take, let's say, like take notice and learn from and converse. It's like learn and converse, because I'm not outside of it. I'm in it, and question my own structures through it as well. Yeah, I mean, one thing that was really compelling for me was coming to the realization that there are actually two characters in the film. You know, there's Carmen and there's Los Angeles as a city. And there are interesting moments in which those characters interface and interchange and sort of shapeshift in and out of each other quite beautifully. And, you know, as I was looking at these bare images of the city, which are so rare, you know, these empty railroad tracks, or, you know, these empty freeways, I really started thinking of these certain parts of the city as, you know, body parts or organs, and thinking about the freeways as the lungs of the city, and what does it mean when they're not activated, they can't breathe, or thinking about the sound of the crosswalk and making this connection that it also sounded like the sound of a heart monitor. And I think the one main thing that, you know, both characters, Carmen and LA, have in common is that they're both going through a health crisis. So can you tell us a bit more about these connections that you were trying to make, and, you know, a bit more about your experience with your health crisis and, you know, having to be in a hospital at such a precarious time? Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, it's, you know, in thinking about the film, it was always for me like an artwork, and speaking with Julia and Aldo and Johnny, always approaching it as this is an artwork. And for me, an artwork has to have this moment where like I always call it the flip, and then looking for the flip. And so entering the work in that way, it was like I had to find first, it's like like a connection that was a personal connection. And one of the things that was interesting was that it was like, oh, Carmen and Carmen the character, like in my conversations with Julia and Aldo, and this idea of Carmen, me, the body that's processing and drawing from my personal experiences in these moments, and being in the hospital during this time, and feeling the vulnerability of my own body, and feeling the ephemerality of it, and how quickly things change, and then within the context of, let's say, like the like pandemic, like proximity to death. I mean, it wasn't COVID, but there's many things. Body is the body. It's infections, confronting that, and then thinking about Carmen, the character, and then being able to kind of reflect on that at the same time, responding to feelings of, let's say, like being like having an expectation that someone would pick me up from the hospital, for example, and then at the same time, like there's like this threat going on, and the deconstructions of my own expectations or notions or assumptions. Like it just felt like a lot of like deconstruction, reconstruction, a lot of like that's kind of what I remember from that experience. The proximity that we are always vulnerable to death. The awareness that our bodies are just like the awareness that we have skin, the awareness that we have organs and are fragile and are ever changing. I think the awareness of change in our cellular level, all of these things kind of are involved in that kind of knowing and then processing. And then at the same time, with this idea of the character Carmen in the film, it feels like almost like pry myself away from my direct experience to be able to almost like see myself on the phone or hear my voice recorded, and then be able to kind of have that distance to focus it into an artwork, which was very like that part of the process was new for me, and then to be able to like engage in dialogue with, let's say, like Aldo, the editor, and Julia, and really just to focus what the flip of the film was going to be, or what it was going to be about. When we went into this, it was like, what is this film about? Well, I'm gonna find out. I'm gonna go walking, and I'm gonna experience my body in the landscape. And when I started, my body was actually very weak. This was right after my hospitalization, and so walking was even more of a challenge. But I couldn't stay inside. Something propelled me to be in public space. I felt it was important. I felt like the search needed that. My body needed to be in motion, and I couldn't be still. And in my mind, in my own processing, there was this like idea of like vulnerability, and I basically almost had just died. So I was like, okay, well, I need this for many different reasons. I need to walk and continue this process that I've been doing to heal. So
yeah, it seemed like it was this very cathartic process for you and healing. And to your point about public space, I think the notion of public space is really also a centerpiece of this film. I was thinking so much about how the simple act of walking in a way during this pandemic has, become illegal or dangerous, or, the notion of walking after curfew, or the act of being in public space in general, the danger of that during this, or this idea of shelter in place is this, this focus on staying at home, and how our sort of everyday interactions or activations sort of now become scary, and potential for contamination. And what I thought was so amazing was seeing how obviously at the very beginning of quarantine, our public space was so empty in a certain sense. But then come June, in the wake of the various police killings of Black folks, there is this surge of bodies into the public space. And I wanted to talk about that in relation to your film, because you bring up the 92 uprisings, which I thought was a really interesting, part in which, you're thinking through how these uprisings have affected the landscape. And here we are, so many years later, sort of contending with the same moment for the same reasons. So can you talk a bit more about why you felt it was important to bring the uprisings into this narrative?
I think I think about when I was in the hospital, and when you're in the hospital, there's like this feeling of like surrender. You surrender your body to the doctor to heal you, or you kind of, there's like a letting go. And I bring that up because I was thinking about, early in the pandemic, I was really surprised and how I felt. I was feeling like people were just like letting go of public space. Like, we are going to like surrender public space because now it's dangerous, and we're going to stay inside, and we just let go of this public space. And I that was one of the things that really was like, no, we have to retain this. This is all we have. This is important. We like I can be safe, with being responsible, wearing a mask and keeping a distance, but my body in public space is an important thing. And I did encounter this thing where if I didn't have a specific role, like these structures became very apparent. If I wasn't jogging, walking my dog, go, like, I don't have a dog, but like, it was one of those things where it was, if I wasn't going specifically to the supermarket, I wasn't supposed to be there. And for me, it was like, I need to be here. I need to process this and feel this. So in being there during that time, there's certain things that I started feeling, and that are mentioned in the film. So for example, this idea of, when I would see another person walking without a mask, it'd be like, oh, there's like this, okay, maybe I need to like cross the street, or somebody would cough, and it's like, okay, like, oh, maybe this person's sick, let me like move. And up to that point, I've always felt really pretty safe in the city, in my adult life, walking wherever, and there is this emotional, almost like point that connected with me at age 11, in the 1990s, and feeling this sort of energy of tension building. So I grew up in like Westlake MacArthur Park, Pico Union in the 90s, and really kind of being 11, being in my body was just, it was like a threat. You were, whether there was like a feeling of like, oh, like the public space is a threat, you need to stay inside. And so these 2 points of experiences in the landscape through time connected for me. And it reminded me of the 92 riots, and how that was sort of what that feeling, like that it was like an energy, like that feeling was there. And so in speaking with Aldo and Julia, and in our conversations, Aldo had worked with in his own work, he had worked with some of the 92 uprising footage. Mm. And so I started saying, this is reminding me of this. And we started engaging in conversation and sort of bringing that in. And then we brought that into the film. And as time progressed, then that energy, I really feel like that energy began coming forward, and it led to the protests and to the sort of taking back of public space and a response to the oppression that we were feeling, and the violence against bodies, Black bodies and brown bodies, and which is very the exploitation of bodies in every way, and the same systems that were present in 92, exploiting bodies and labor and all those things, and we're still present, are still present now, but we're still present and felt. I think the protests feel very different for me from 92 to 2020, but that energy, that tension right before, that threat, that almost like suspension, the way that it was processing in my body, that's those 2 points. That's what brought that into the film.
Absolutely. I mean, it just makes me think of this idea that's been going around that capitalism is the virus, actually.
Oh, yeah.
And that, to your point, we are dealing with the same systems that uphold capitalism and therefore oppress Black and brown folks, since forever. And I feel like, a large part of why these protests have been so successful and perhaps felt different this time around, I think has to do with the fact that the pandemic led people into these protests. And what I mean by that is, people were sitting in the house, just sort of, this tension was building up, I think, inside. So many people had lost their jobs. So many people had family members and friends who were passing away, still passing away. So I think, both the pandemic of the virus, but also the pandemic of systemic racism, which is one that we have been dealing with since forever. I think those 2 things coming together is really what emboldened so many people to come out en masse,
Yeah. It's our disembodiment, the exploitation of bodies,
Mm-hmm.
Capitalism, basically, like using like lives for profit. These are systems that have been in place, and it was for me this idea of construction, like the idea of progress, like forward-moving progress, construction. The one thing that's, the city's very quiet, but the construction machines are still going. That sort of red construction character in the film that says going, going, gone. To me, that's this like capitalism systemic thing that's the virus, and it's connected to all of these things, to systemic racism, to the exploitation of bodies, to our dehumanization, to our, psychological states of mind, to all of these things. And And then at the same time, this idea of construction, but a deconstruction of these systems within us, and like a reconstruction of new possibilities. So the pandemic shifted things, like broke it enough for us to be able to experience different ways of being, different ways of spending our time, like seeing the sun in the middle of the day, different, like it broke these patterns just enough to allow, like to give us some time and space to reflect on ourselves and these systems. And I think that's what also like propelled this need for change. We felt it, we knew it, we've known it for a long time. That need for change, we've been digesting that. It's been killing us, affecting us, like really changing us, like on a cellular level. And then now it's like, okay, this is the deconstruction, and how do we want to reconstruct ourselves? So it's I have found it really interesting that construction just visually was kind of going on. And then I remember in my walking, first my own personal deconstruction of self and concepts and ideas, and then feeling the deconstruction of our shared sort of this moment of shared deconstruction and reconstruction, like demolition, but in a way to get rid of these systems that are not working for us, that we know are not working and that need to change.
Absolutely. I feel like, in the, I feel like LA as a city has been shifting so much for the past few years, but one of the constants has been construction. And I feel like construction has been this representation of, all of these things you speak of, but also, again, something that's upholding the status quo, something that is going in and radically changing communities and the culture of certain communities. And, it's this very visceral and violent act, that is happening all over our city. I wanted to shift to, there are some really compelling visuals in the film. One that I really sat with was, the visual of you staring into the store window of this pristine bed as, incoming traffic sort of makes its way. And it was this really beautiful moment that actually brought me back to like sort of early cinema techniques. I'm thinking of like George Méliès or like the Lumiere brothers, these early attempts at sort of picking at this medium and seeing what was possible. And I thought you used that reflective surface in this really interesting way. So can you talk about some of those moments where I think you were really sort of tapping into, these optical illusions and these sort of early things that cinema did?
Yeah. I mean, thinking about what the film was going to be about, kind of going into this space of not knowing, there were these three moments in my walks or in my circuits that I kind of kept repeating or going back to. The bed behind the window was one of them. And I remember just walking and then being kind of, it wasn't the first time I was seeing it in a way, because I've known that it's there, but then in the repetition of the movement, it sort of stopped me, and I was like, what does it take to have what does it take to have a bed like this? It was like this confrontation of I had recently moved, and I had bought myself like these linens, and I started to reflect. It was just like this reflection, like, it's taken me so long to have a bed like this, and what does this mean within the context of economics and aspirations and ideas of success, and this bed encapsulated these notions of, like these ideas of what it means to be okay, or like what are we supposed to strive for? And again, it's like within capitalism, we're not like, I never see myself outside of it. I'm in the system as well. So that was one of the, that point I knew was going to be part of what the film was going to be about. And then seeing the cars sort of almost like penetrate this bed, break down, like seeing the city almost like disintegrated, gave me like hope. It's first it stopped me, and it was like a moment of reflection, and then it was like, it gave me hope, and it also scared me. It was both. It was both. It could fluctuate. It's not one way or the other. It's how you choose to perceive it, and how you choose to reconstruct it in your own ideas of what success is for you, and what that looks like and what we are striving for. Another moment that helped me construct the ideas of the film, or like really shape the film, is the dog behind the fence on Mission Road. And so in my walks, I would pass by this fence with this dog, and I could feel like the dog wanting to play. It was understimulated because, usually, let's say like its patterns had changed, like if it had company like the whole day, and like, now like the business was closed, so it was just a guard dog, and it was supposed to just guard, but it wanted to play, it wanted human contact. And so this feeling that I was experiencing, where I was on the sidewalk, there was the chain link fence and the dog, and that tension between the dog wanting to play and being happy that I was there as a presence, and then also knowing that it needed to guard the business, and like not being able to hold its body and it started being in motion, in this spinning motion. And I would join in that spinning motion. And there was a sort of connection in the tension. Like I felt at a certain point, I felt like I was feeling like that dog, and I was the fence, and that dog was me. Like there was these 3 points of me, the dog, and the tension. We were all sort of one thing. That was important somehow. Like that was a structure or a pattern or something that I wanted to bring into the film. And then the last point that really kind of built the ideas and the work is this like a construction, that red construction, I don't know, like dinosaur claw, going, gone, that's just digging into the earth. There's a sort of, I don't know, that forceful shove, or that shoving, that scale of it, in contrast to the body, and the just the fragility of the body, and it's like a movement for progress, or these things, or like also like the deconstruction in ourselves, how strong that needs to be at times too. So these 3 points began to make me think about, okay, what's the idea behind the film, and these visuals were just kind of, I would visit them often. These were like my main points of contact. The only other visual that I would say was like a constant, but that one was moving, it wasn't fixed, was like the gesture of the hand, trying to kind of like almost like touch, or like almost like capture a moment, change the scale, like change the perception of scale with the body.
And let's talk about the hand, because I think what's so amazing about this piece is it is sort of the centerpiece of an entire body of work that you've created. And this notion of, hand glove dog. And I'm looking at one of your works behind you that stemmed from this series. And I'm wondering if you could talk a bit more about, these works, the use of your hand, how, your notion of circuit is clearly coming in. And also, I think the activation of the hand in these works remind me of that dog sort of wanting to break out, or a burst of energy, that it's deeply desiring, because it's having to stay guard, as you said. And I think that tension or that energy is something that I feel like we're all feeling right now, where we are being forced to stay at home, and we so desperately want to interact with people. We so desperately want to move our bodies and activate and energize. So can you speak more about that series?
Yeah, it really, I think about, you know, even like walking, processing, digesting through the body, and this idea of being embodied. And I felt a lot of almost like grief when I had to wear gloves and I couldn't touch the surfaces of the city. It was very, I don't know, like, it was hard for me to accept. It was like, I found it, I couldn't believe it. Like, how is it possible that I can't touch the surfaces of the city? That's somehow off limits. And I felt like that grief. And at the same time, it was a deconstruction and reconstruction of the systems that I was feeling had led to my disembodiment, and I was trying to regain the embodiment. And then as the film progressed, and as Aldo and I worked on sort of like constructing the like, it feels like the skeleton and giving it form of the body of the film. And I had to sort of let the film be in other hands in a way. I had been going through this process of, everything, like turning the camera upon me and then being able to kind of hear myself in this relationship of really kind of this back and forth. And that process didn't stop. I was still walking. I was still needing that touch, that connection between the interior space and the exterior, both like the private space and the public. And somehow the paper surface became a skin. And this action of bringing my body into the processing of these drawings, I felt like this compulsion to place my body onto the paper surface, and then like this idea of like the action of tracing. This is all in the context of like wash your hands at first, and I found that whole like wash your hands thing really problematic. I actually made like a shower curtain where I traced my hand. It was like these ways of trying to understand what was going on. And this drawing behind me was a moment sort of later in the drawing process, or like in the middle, where it was my walking routes, and I realized that I was the dog as well. And so it's a map. I remember when I made it horizontal, and I made it not planning the composition beforehand, but it was like, okay, this is Wabash going on to Soto, and moving my hand and thinking about my body moving through the landscape, at the same time thinking about this dog that I was searching for in the drawing. So it was all part of the film and the drawing I see as one thing as well, because it's the same process. It just shifted medium as the process of filmmaking, as the collaborative process of filmmaking, kind of, where I had to like let go at a certain point, and then Aldo would give me his he would kind of bring in his like choices, you know, his creative input, his talents into the film, and then I would reflect on that, and then I would converse. So that conversation was going on in the film, and then my conversation with my body and my own processing also continued. And then it was simultaneous to the sound. So then I was like, no, we need domestic sounds like the tea kettle and the washing machine, but they need to be out in the landscape, because there's you know, the inner space and the outer space, the inside and the private and the public. There is no boundaries here. We are like, my body is the same body here as it is outside, and you know, kind of continuing those processes and letting those processes layer and take form, and being porous to almost like to take in all the information and absorb all the energy, to be able to have more conversations that would then further shape the work. And that's kind of how the process started. I couldn't stop. Erin, I couldn't stop just drawing, and the drawing was in my body, like the movements were in here already, from the walking, from the taking in of the landscape and the energy and the, you know, all of that. And I started with graphite because of the fence and the exterior, and then moved to crayon, like the action of crayons, like drawing with crayons on the floor within the domestic space. And then just these materials in along with the hand and the relationship between memory, use, the action of making a mark. All of that came into the work.
Yeah, it's definitely felt. And you know, your show is the first show I've seen since quarantine. So, you know, lastly, I just want to talk about, you know, where can we see this work right now? And also, you know, something I think we're trying to do in light of all that's transpired recently is really highlight, you know, orgs that, you know, people within the Hammer community feel are important to sort of amplify. So I know that you are a part of the lace auction. So maybe if you could just tell us a little bit about that, and then also where we can see the work.
So yes, I'm making an edition print for lace, and it comes out on the 22nd. It's called Float. It is completely part of this whole process. At the same time as the drawings, I've been working with the idea of printmaking. And so that's released. I think you can see that if you go to Lace, to the Lace website, there's a link where you can register for the print. So please support Los Angeles Contemporary Exhibitions in that way. They've supported Los Angeles-based artists and artists for generations. So I'm thrilled to be a part of that. And then for the shows, there's 3 sites, Commonwealth and Council. You can see Glove Dog, oh my gosh, Glove Hand Dog, Clock Shop, which, you know, there's also, you can see some of the drawings and the work as well. And then there's Stairwell Gallery, which is a residency that I did that really helped me focus my thoughts and start my healing back in February. And so you see the whole progression, and Stairwell, that's where I started working on the print for Lace. So we're all connected. It's all like these movements with people supporting each other, coming together, and the practice kind of, it's like me, like moving through the landscape. And I'd like to really, you know, thank Sarah and Daniela and Lace. I'd like to thank Julia and Mackenzie. So like Julia Meltzer, Mackenzie Hoffman, the editor Aldo Velasco. Thank you so much, Aldo. Johnny Wilson, who did sound. Gina Klein, who did photography. And Clock Shop really for giving me the chance to have the resources, to working and respecting the process, and also just being brave enough to, trust the process with me. Like Julia, like, it's like, thank you. Like, because I was like, we're going to make a film. I don't know what it's going to be about. I'm going to search. Thank you for going into the unknown with me. I mean, the team, what a great team, going into the unknown, being in process with me, and each of us bringing our talents to this work. And also thank you so much to the Hammer Museum, to Connie Butler, of course, and thank you, Erin, so much for bringing your talent and conversation and perspective, and having this, like, making this time to really talk about the ideas and bring those ideas kind of forward, and be able to share those ideas through this Hammer platform.
Well, thank you. I mean, it's obviously, you were made in LA 2018 and produced, such an incredible large-scale sculpture for that. And so I think, it's a pleasure to continue to work with artists who are part of the LA community, and to, support the work and be a part of the work as it evolves and grows through the practice. So
it's inspiring. It's inspiring to see everyone sort of coming together to support each other, to support an artistic practice, to support like Los Angeles as an arts thinking, making, I don't know, processing space. It's motivating for me.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much, Carmen. Thank you for such a great film. And thank you for being a part of this. Appreciate your time.
Thank you. And Lace and Commonwealth and Council, Stairwell, and Clock Shop. Thank you.
Awesome. All right. Thank you.
Bye.